So, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends, my name is Eva Kovács, and I am the Deputy Director of Academic Affairs at the Vienna Wiesenthal Institute for Holocaust Studies. And it's my great pleasure and honor to welcome you at the workshop on the precarious archives, precarious voices, expanding Jewish narratives from the margins. I'm grateful for the presence of so many of you here or virtually today in this very difficult time of the pandemic. You represent what is best in the archival project of the Holocaust studies, and I'm convinced we have prepared an inspiring program for you. Recognition and gratitude also go our institutional partners of this workshop. It is for the first time when the Wiesenthal Institute organized a conference with the Baeck Institute, New York, Berlin, and the second time with the Rothschild Foundation, Hanadiv, Europe. It happened almost 10 years ago in 2013, but with a more positive title, Heritage Recovered, the Holocaust in Jewish Archives, and I still have a beautiful program of these workshop. It was a wonderful workshop. And it was also a kind of international comparison. And we are proud to host again a workshop in Vienna with you and look back together on the developments in its field over the past 10 years. Your consistent commitment is very much appreciated. And now let me introduce the team who worked intensively on the concept of this event. I will start with Julie Dawson. Julie is a doctoral candidate at the University of Vienna Institute for Contemporary History. She holds degrees for Columbia University, New York, and Northwestern University, Evanston. Julie worked for the Baeck Institute from 2010 to 2019, so almost 10 years, directing the archival surveys of Transylvania and Bukovina. From 2016 to 2019, she was in Medjas. I cannot. Medjas. Okay. So in Hungarian it is Medjas, as a researcher in residence. It's a beautiful place in Transylvania. For a European Horizon 2020 project, which will hold the name Traces. She had a Fortunov Fellowship at our institute last year, and her research interests include Jewish Bukovina, communist Romania, women's history, trauma, and memory studies. And now I will turn to Marianne Vinsberger. Marianne Vinsberger studied comparative literature and Romance languages at the University of Vienna. Since March 2018, she is a research assistant at the VWI, at the Vienna Wiesenthal Institute for Holocaust Studies. From 2014 and 2017, she worked as a predoctoral assistant at the Institute for German Studies at the University of Vienna, and she's a member of the executive board of the Theodor Kramer Society for Exile Studies, also in Vienna. Her research interests are literary representations of the Holocaust, Yiddish literature, and memory studies. She edited, together with Olaf Terpitz, the book Places and Media of Encounter, Transfer, Mediality, and Situativity of Jewish Literatures in 2021, and another book with other colleagues. The title is Preserving Lived Context, Gábor as Portable Archives from the Transgenerational Perspective, also this year. And now I will continue with Mirjam. Mirjam Wilhelm studied art history and curatorial studies at Trier University and Goethe University, Frankfurt am Main. She holds a PhD from the Institute of Art and Visual Culture at Karl von Ossietzky University in Oldenburg and joined the VWI, our institute, in January 2021 as a project collaborator for the European Commission-funded ERI project. Previously, she has worked as a research assistant at Yale University in 2018 and at the interdisciplinary Frankfurt Humanities Research Center, curating the digital image database for the project Erinnerungspolitik und Bildgebrauch. She has received several fellowships, for instance, from the German Academic Scholarship Foundation and from the Selma Stern Center for Jewish Studies, Berlin-Brandenburg. Her research interests encompass the visual history of the Holocaust, Jewish women artists under Nazi persecution, digital humanities, as well as gender and queer studies. Most recent publication is Vieira Bila, 1940, and the Neo-Byzantine, Neo-Byzantine, a Jewish avant-gardist in Budapest, Berlin, Belgrade, and beyond. I would like to introduce also Gábor Kádár, who is in the virtual reality now. We are really happy to welcome him because we are in an intensive cooperation since more than a decade with the Rothschild Foundation. Gábor holds a PhD and he is the director of the Erusha project, the digital humanities initiative by the Rothschild Foundation, Hanadiv, Europe, and the recurrent visiting professor of the Jewish Studies program of the Central European University, Budapest and Vienna. He is a former senior historian of the Hungarian Jewish Archives, Budapest. And he is the author and co-author of 6 monographs and numerous studies, articles, and encyclopedia entries regarding various aspects of the history of Jews in Hungary, as well as the history of genocide and ethnic violence in Central Europe. He has led and participated in archival research project for the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum and Yad Vashem as well. Dr. Kádár is also a member of the Digital Forum Advisory Board of the European Association of Jewish Studies. And last but not least, special thanks to the Women and Gender History Research Group of the University of Vienna, also taking part in the realization of this event. Johanna Gehmacher, also in the virtual world. Women and Gender History Research Group of the University of Vienna has been teaching at the Institute of Contemporary History since 1998. Since 2001, she is a professor of history at the University of Vienna, and she has held a number of university functions and is currently speaker of the key research area, Women's and Gender History at the Faculty for Historical and Cultural Studies. In the academic year, in 2018 and 19, she was the Gerda Henkel visiting professor at the German Historical Institute in London and at the London School of Economics. She is a member of the interdisciplinary network Biografieforschung and co-editor of the Austrian Journal of Historical Studies, ÖZG. So, welcome again. It's beautiful that everybody is here or in the Zoom, and the floor is yours, Julie.
Thank you, Eva. So I also will say welcome to everybody here, both on-site and online, to this workshop, Precarious Archives, Precarious Voices, Expanding Jewish Narratives from the Margins, hosted by the Vienna Wiesenthal Institute. This workshop was a long time in coming for reasons with which we are all familiar. I checked my emails this morning and found it was back in late 2018 that I first wrote to my colleagues at Leo Baeck in New York to suggest the idea to co-organize a conference with the Wiesenthal Institute here in Vienna. I was at that time wrapping up a 6-year archival survey in Romania, and I suggested we do a conference around the idea of new archival resources. A few weeks later, Marianne Vinsberger and I met casually to brainstorm about the possibilities. And in March of 2019, we began to put words on paper with the goal of inviting select participants or panelists to discuss recent archival discoveries and jointly issuing a call for papers targeted at researchers whose work illuminates or untangles narratives that have been underrepresented or entirely overlooked. We aim to collaborate with the Rothschild Foundation, Hanadiv Europe, which has been playing a crucial role in the past years in the accessing of new archival collections in Central and Eastern Europe, and cooperate with institutes from the University of Vienna, especially the Institute for Eastern European History and the Faculty of the Women's and Gender History Research Group at the Institute for Contemporary History. Of course, at that time, we imagined that the conference would take place within a year or so. I want to thank the Wiesenthal Institute for its great flexibility during these precarious times, if I may say, and patience during the challenges of these past years. It's a great pleasure to see the conference finally taking place, and even in person to an extent, and to be doing so largely as we initially envisioned it. We have panels on gendered experience of the Holocaust, new methods and materials, hidden and endangered archives, and microhistories. We're delighted to welcome participants from Austria, Germany, Hungary, the Czech Republic, France, England, Israel, and the United States. We have here archivists, artists, historians of various disciplines, and are especially honored that Natalia Lección of the University of Florida could join us as the keynote speaker. I want to thank here those who made this possible financially: the Nationalfonds, the Zukunftsfonds, the Rothschild Foundation, Hanadiv Europe, the University of Vienna's Women's and Gender History Research Group, and the Institute for Eastern European History, my colleagues at the Leo Baeck Institute, and of course, the Vienna Wiesenthal Institute. I hope I did not forget anybody. I want to especially here thank Marianne Vinsberger and Mirjam Wilhelm, who took on the vast majority of the organizational logistics for this workshop. Webster's dictionary defines precarious as not safe, strong, or steady, dependent on chance circumstances, unknown conditions, or uncertain developments, and finally, depending on the will or pleasure of another. By highlighting archival material that is precarious, in physical danger, or dependent on chance circumstances or uncertain developments, we aim to secure these materials for posterity in physical terms, but also by way of uncovering and examining the stories therein. By listening to precarious voices which are heard based on the whim of those alive today, we researchers, our intent is to stabilize the precarity and steady the voice, while still allowing room for the complexities of hesitancy. In her seminal book, After Such Knowledge, Memory, History, and the Legacy of the Holocaust, Eva Hoffman wrote, quote, "The most immediate impact of atrocity is on the cosmos of each individual self, and it is that impact we need to grasp first if we are to understand something of the nature of such events and their consequences," end quote. Over the next few days, we look forward to exploring this impact by listening to these voices and reflecting on the multitude of narratives still in precarity today. Thank you, and pass it on to Marianne.
Thank you, Julie. Dear participants joining us live and via Zoom, dear cooperation partners and colleagues. As Julie mentioned already, this workshop has been in the planning phase for quite some time due to a pandemic that has froze plans in meeting in person, that has interrupted direct exchange again and again, and still we are here, looking forward to 2.5 days of hearing, listening, discussing, and learning. Our workshop has a motto. For the call text and the concept, we chose a quotation by Mona Körte, a literary scholar who, among many other things, has worked on autobiographical texts on Jewish literatures and memory and memoirs. In German, the quotation is, "Wie Strandgut werden Überlebenszeugnisse, Alben, Collagen, Skizzen, schwer entzifferbare Manuskripte aufgelesen und ob der Lesbarkeit ihrer Botschaft und Glaubwürdigkeit unsicher von einem zum nächsten gereicht." We have translated it a little bit freely, I would say, because it was very hard to translate. Like belongings washed upon the seashore, testimonial objects of survivors, albums, collages, sketches, difficult to decipher manuscripts are being collected, and because of the precariousness inherent in their message and authenticity, they are passed from one to another. Why did we choose this quotation? Because it contains a lot of what we had been thinking of when conceptualizing this workshop, a broad approach to what is a testimonial object, an Überlebenszeugnis, or a source in general. An album, a collage, a draft, a drawing, a sketch, you name it. Because the metaphor of the Flaschenpost, or the message in the bottle, draws together the idea of precariousness, of the unlikeliness to find an addressee, with the aim to archive, to conserve, and to speak to an audience far off, not only spatially, but also temporally. At some point, a Flaschenpost might be washed upon the seashore and poses questions of who sent it, who was the imagined addressee. We might not know anything of how the message was transmitted, which ways it took, but the fact that it is here challenges us as researchers, historians, literary scholars, cultural historians, archivists, and artists alike. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne, and thank you, Eva, for the kind introduction. I would also like to very warmly welcome you to our opening session today. It's a pleasure to be here and to be able to be part of this exciting event despite, well, the difficult circumstances. I joined the organization team of this workshop in April 2021, and I would like to thank both my colleague Marianne and Julie Dawson for this wonderful opportunity. In addition, also many thanks to our designated chairs for your participation in our program, to the whole VWI team, and of course to our technical support, Sandro, Manfred, and Martin, for making this hybrid format possible. When the call for papers for this workshop went online, we were soon overwhelmed by the great interest in the topic and also by the vast number of excellent proposals we received. In response to our call, which focused on precarious archives and precarious voices, narratives of the marginalized were approached from an inspiring plurality of perspectives. We had marginalized Holocaust experiences, for instance, of Jewish women, but also from the LGBTIQ+ community, hidden heritage and endangered archives, the rediscovery of microhistories, and finally, new methods and materials, including digital approaches, as well as artistic engagements. Each of these perspectives has unique significance and potential for answering those questions which were raised in our call. And all of them will most likely raise even more interesting questions in our discussions. What overlooked stories are recently being found in newly accessible archives, and how can they be unearthed? How do we approach such new materials methodologically? Which old and established narratives are being contested or reframed by focusing on marginalizations? And how can we as a research community make those marginalized voices heard, which have remained invisible and ignored until now? Due to the current situation, we had to make some last-minute changes to our program. And so let me just say a few words about these updates and about general technicalities. Our workshop is a hybrid format, and we are happy to welcome a handful of in-house panelists here with us today, but the majority of our speakers will join via Zoom. There will be no in-person audience. And if you're joining us online, please use the chat function in Zoom and type in your question, remark, or comment for the panel discussions. Today we will kick off the workshop at 2 p.m. with the first session on gendered experiences of the Holocaust, with a special focus on violence and resistance. And here we had some minor changes regarding our panelists. Instead of Marta Havriško, who will present on Friday, we will hear from Kinga Frojimovic, who kindly agreed to switch places. After a small break, our afternoon session will continue at 3:30 p.m. with the first New Methods and Materials panel centered around digital approaches. At 5:30 p.m., we'll look especially forward to Natalia Alexion's keynote lecture, When Feiger Left Tadeusz, Precarious Voices in Wartime Relationships, which will trace the post-war correspondence between Feiger Ginsberg, a Polish Jewish woman who survived the Holocaust in today's Lviv, and Tadeusz Kobylko, a Pole who hid her and her niece. Natalia, thank you very much for being with us. Tomorrow we will come back to the topic of gendered experiences of the Holocaust and focus on women's voices. followed by the second New Methods and Materials panel, which is dedicated to art and the archive. And here we are excited to spur a dialogue between scholarly presentations and two art-based approaches. In the afternoon, we look forward to the Hidden Heritage and Endangered Archives panel by our colleagues from the Rothschild Foundation and the Leo Baeck Institute. At 4 p.m., we'll have a roundtable discussion with Joseph Moser, dedicated to Johnny Moser and his private archive, highlighting his role as an important pioneer of early Holocaust research in Austria. And on a rather sad note, we deeply regret to inform you that given the latest developments in the pandemic, we had to cancel our conference dinner. But please feel free to gather with other in-person participants in smaller groups and at your own risk. On Friday morning, we return once again to gendered experiences of the Holocaust with a panel revolving around the LGBTIQ+ community and thus broadening the scope of this thematic trajectory. Unfortunately, Rosanna Ramsden had to cancel, but we're still looking forward to the remaining presentation on the persecution of bi and homosexual men during Nazism. And our final panel is dedicated to narratives of the marginalized and will bring compelling case studies to the table, which for the most part revolve around microhistories. And finally, we're very happy to have Stephen Neron, director of the Yale Fortunoff Archive and honorary VWI member with us for this workshop, who kindly agreed to give the closing remarks on Friday. Well, so much for technicalities. I'm very much looking forward to all the panels and to our discussions within the next 2 days. And with that, I would like to hand over to Gábor Kádár. Thank you.
Welcome. Good afternoon. Hello from London. It's great to be here, even if only virtually. It's a great pleasure of the Rothschild Foundation, Hanadiv Europe, to support this workshop. As many of you know, the foundation is a London-based philanthropic organization that supports a wide range of projects across Europe to ensure Jewish communal life and cultural heritage are sustained for future generations. We are supporting organizations, institutions, and individuals in various areas, such as academic Jewish studies, Jewish education, and Jewish cultural heritage. That includes museums, archives, and libraries, of course. But we are not only a funding body, we also initiate our own projects, the most recent of which is the Endangered Jewish Community Archives project, which I will present tomorrow. Supporting this very exciting event that focuses on the so far inaccessible documents and the question of how to explore, analyze, and interpret them is a logical continuation of our grant-making activities. In the past years, we have supported a number of individuals, scholars, projects, and institutions whose research will be presented in the coming few days. We were, of course, very happy to work with Julie Dawson, for example, and the Leo Baeck Institute, while Julie was conducting her truly groundbreaking research in Transylvania and Bukovina, exploring, among other archival materials, of course, the precarious Jewish community archives there. It is also our pleasure to support the work of the Research Center for Computational Social Science at ELTE University Budapest, in the framework of which Dr. Ildikó Barna, Alexandra Szabó, and others are using a cutting-edge digital humanities methodology to analyze and examine the language of Holocaust survivor testimonies that were taken immediately after the war in the framework of one of the earliest attempts to record evidence by a Hungarian Jewish aid organization called National Committee for Attending Deputies. Methodology will be also in the center of the presentation of Professor Andreas Leonhardt of the University of Mainz, whose seminal research and work was also supported by the Rothschild Foundation regarding Genizot in Germany. Dr. Lenka Ulichna from the Jewish Museum of Prague will also talk about Genizot as the precarious traces of once flourishing Jewish community life. So I'm very much looking forward to these and, of course, all the other presentations. Even obviously in this format, we do what we can under the given circumstances. I would like to thank all the organizers and the contributors very much for participating in this conference and putting together this conference. And I'm really looking forward to hearing all the presentations. Thank you very much.
Okay, may I start? Yes. Welcome from Firenze, from where I am connected with you, and I send my greetings and my welcome on behalf of the Women and Gender key research area at the Faculty for Historical Research at the University of Vienna, and I also want to include the best wishes from my co-chair, Gabriela Hauch, who cannot be with us today. The Women's and Gender History key research area, or the research group, goes back for many years now at our university, and even when it started, it only continued the long history of women's and gender history research at our university that started, I'd say, in the 1980s. The focus of our work at the key research area is, in fact, on building networks, on facilitating exchange, because the more costly thing of really funding research has to be done at other institutions. But we were very happy to learn from Julie Dawson about the conference, the workshop she planned, and we were very happy that she approached us with the proposition to cooperate, which we really appreciated. And we want to thank Julie, together with Marianne Vinsberger and Mirjam Wilhelm, for developing this extremely exciting workshop, and very much also thank them for keeping on doing that in these difficult times we are in the moment, and not to give up on the event. And I'm very happy that it takes place now. The topic of this workshop is of great relevance for us at the Women's and Gender History Group, not only because of the explicit gender focus the organizers chose, and which I think is very important to this topic, but also because the question of the archive and what is kept and what is lost and what is kept officially and what is hidden in archives or outside archives or survives in precarious archives, and also what is deemed worthy of keeping, is a core issue of women and gender history. Talking about colonial archives, Laura and Stoller has posited that we have to read all these archives not only against their grain, but also to analyze them along the grain and to understand their specific practices, their hidden and their open procedures, to understand how we construct our history and how our history constructs us. And I think this is perfectly what this workshop intends to do, and therefore I really look forward to listening to the presentations, although I have to apologize because of my duties here in Florence. I can't be with you all the time, but I wish you all the best for the conference and look forward to the papers. So greetings from Firenze.
So thank you, Johanna Gehmacher. Thank you, Kádár, for your welcome, and the thanks to all of us involved, I guess, because everyone had his own way of participating here in this workshop. So for now, we will have a technical break, and we will start with the next panel at 2 p.m. And the next panel is Gendered Experiences of the Holocaust Between Violence and Resistance. So thank you, and see you.